All right, welcome everybody. We are going to get started tonight. Welcome to all of you who are already associated with the Chatfield Edge. Welcome to those of you who might be new to us. This is the sixth in our series of webinars we have done this year to support the people in our community, especially our scholars who are all at different points on their journeys. Some are just starting out, figuring out what they want to do for school. Some of them are right in the middle of it, balancing school and life. Some are right at the end and getting ready to move into the workforce. So whether you're a scholar, a friend, a mentor, a new person who's just figuring it all out, we know that you're balancing a lot, and Jeannie tonight is going to help us figure out how to open our minds to everything that is going on and everything that's out there. Um, a few housekeeping items. Our presentation will run 30 to 40 minutes, and then we will have some time for some questions. Jeannie's going to do some interactive things. So if you want to have something to write with, that is terrific. And or we might be asking you to type some questions into the chat box, all those kinds of things. Please mute your microphone while you are watching in case there are dogs, cats, children, etc., running around. Like I said, we will have some interactions, so be ready for that. And then again, have your questions ready to go at the end. And I'm going to turn it over right now to Jeannie Judge, who works for the marketing pack, but has all kinds of other qualifications and degrees. And I'll let her share a little bit about herself with you. So take it away, Jeannie.
Great. Thank you, David. Well, welcome everyone. Um, I'm just going to do a quick little introduction so you kind of know who I am and where I'm coming from. And then I'm going to ask you to think about kind of the why. Why did you sign up for this? Um, and we'll get into that in just a minute, and we'll kind of allow that to be a through line through what we do tonight. Um, so my name is Jeannie Bross Judge. I'm originally from Cincinnati. And I've been living in Minneapolis for about the last not quite 30 years. So I kind of feel like I have a foot in two cities. Both places are home. I always say, "Oh, I'm home. I'm home." I have great communities in both cities. I'm married. My husband and I met in a recording studio about 35 years ago, maybe. And we have three young adult children who my daughter said to me the other day when she heard that I was doing this. She said, Mom, I don't really think you see problems. Like you just see challenges to solve. And that's how you raised us. So I don't know where that comes in me, but I was kind of glad it was like a woo parenting moment. I did something right in encouraging, I guess, my kids to become problem solvers. Um, I studied communications and theology as an undergrad and loved it and was doing all kinds of things with nonprofits. And then in the early 2000s, I realized that I was doing a lot of facilitation of groups. And what I would do when I facilitated groups is I would, get them all together and I'd say, "Oh, make sure you have post-its and newsprint and markers. We're going to need those." And so by nature, I'm an ideator. I love new ideas, and I love to help people think of new ideas. But at that time, I was helping people come up with ideas, and we would do these, sheets and sheets and sheets of newsprint ideas. And then at the very end of every workshop, I would just roll them up and I would put them in a rubber band and I would say, "Do you have somebody who can type these up for you?" And they'd say, "Oh, yeah, we do. Thanks." And they would take it like I just gave them the biggest present in the world. And a lot of times I didn't hear back from them. They were kind of like one-off workshops. And when I did hear back from them, or if they were, somebody that I worked with ongoing, I kind of felt like, gosh, we came up with those ideas, but I don't know what to do with them now. And I didn't know what the next step was. And so I found this program called, it was a master's degree in creativity, innovation, and change leadership. And when I was preparing for this, these are my actual colleagues from, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, who we would sit in these classrooms for a couple weeks during the summer and then online throughout the year. And we would be surrounded by post-its and newsprint. But what we learned was how do you take things the next step? What do you do when you come up with the ideas so that you can create change in your life? And so my hope tonight is that we can play with that a little bit. Am I an expert? No. Am I a practitioner? Yes. I'm going to share something that on the left-hand side, that's what sits on my desk. I can see it right now, every day. The one is something that a young person in my life, when I did youth ministry, gave to me, and it just said, "What would you do if you knew you could not fail?" And I love looking at that because it just, on the days when I'm just struggling, or on the days when I have an idea but my fear creeps in, I look at that. What's on the left of that, where it says 2021, I was about 6 years ago um, working in a church basement. And I hated working in this church basement. I loved the people, but being in this church basement was not where I wanted to keep staying. I was doing fundraising and development, which I loved, but I just knew I wasn't in the right environment. And so I had just led a workshop with the church staff on their strengths from the Clifton Strengths Finders. And so I had everybody take a little chalkboard. So I thought, well, I might as well do it. Um, and then what I did is I said, I'd like you to just draw where you see yourself going. So again, as a facilitator, I thought, like, I better just do this. And so that's a picture of me. Um, and my goal then was to use my strengths to take a leap. That was what that represented. Now, I left that on my desk at work. No one ever asked me what it meant. And really, what I was thinking was, how do I get out of here? How do I leap into something new? Because I was scared. Um, and about a year later, I took the leap and I leapt into something new and eventually got into the work that I'm doing now, which is freelance consulting and marketing and event planning. So I say that because I have some experience in taking leaps and in jumping into the unknown. Um, and I have to remind myself and practice it every day. And so that's what I hope we can spend a little bit of time talking about tonight. Um, I'd like to just ask you, I'm going to show you a picture. And when I show this to you, I'd like you to just write down the first word that comes to your mind. And actually, why don't you type it in the chat if you don't mind? If you're willing, go ahead and type it into the chat. What's the first word that comes to your mind when you see that picture? Hey, I'm seeing some unstoppable, jump, leap of faith, vacation, beauty. Um, some really, I'm encouraged to see that. Fearless. Those really are not what I expected. And they are open mindset words. Alleluia. Okay, these are sun. Awesome. Okay. Um, so we're going to talk a little bit about this because tonight we're going to be about taking those leaps, looking into the unknown, and taking a look at your own mind. How do you come at problems, challenges, changes in your life? Now, sometimes when I do this, thank you for, breaking the curve and being different, I get words like this. Oh my gosh, there is crisis there. Oh, I'm so afraid of that. I can get failure or I can get success. I can get panic or peace, anxiety or joy, depending on who you are and where you are, what your mindset is. At any one of those times, if faced with a cliff, what do we think? Now, this has the added effect of a beautiful sunset, and it just is very inviting. If it were pouring down rain in this photo and it was icy, and I had the same two cliffs, you might think something different, or you might think something the same. So pay attention to that as we go through this tonight. When you think about change, when you think about whatever it is that you're kind of wrestling with right now, um, what's your mind saying to you? What's rolling around in your mind? Before we start tonight, before we talk about mindset, I'm just going to ask you, and I'm not going to ask you to share this right now. And actually, you don't have to at all. If you choose to at the end, that's fine. But could you take a minute and think about a challenge, a wish, a problem, something that you're working with in your life, that you'd like to maybe spend a little bit of time with? And again, this is for you. If you choose to share it at the end, fine. Um, but I shared my example of when I was looking to get out of the church basement, right? And I needed something different. It took me a while to get through that process. So, what is something that you are thinking about that's on your mind, something that you're struggling with, a challenge, a problem, something you wish to be different? Take a minute and just write that down wherever you are, so that you can just kind of keep it in front of you tonight. So again, something that is on your mind that you'd like to kind of play with on your own tonight, a challenge, a wish, a goal, a problem that you're struggling with. Okay, so tonight when we play around with this, feel free to, as we go through, keep looking back at that for yourself. Sometimes I've found that it's helpful to have a real life problem or challenge that you're working with, as we go through this because it kind of shapes your thinking. So I wrote one down too. Um, all right, so what is mindset? And I think the mindset that we have when we tackle anything affects who we are and affects how we approach something. And ultimately, I think it affects the process that we go through to reach an outcome. So, what is mindset? It's the attitudes, the thoughts, the beliefs, all that stuff that's going around inside of us, um, that might be spoken, might be unspoken. Um, And I was talking to my son. He's studying to be a personal trainer. I asked him if I could share this. Um, he just turned 26 and he's been working on his associate degree since he was 19 years old. And he will someday get that associate degree. Um, and he had an experience in his personal training class where the first time he took this class, was during the pandemic. And it was a hands-on personal training class that he had to take over Zoom. Um, Dan struggles to learn, and he did not pass that class. So he started to feel a little bit defeated. All right, he's going to take it again. He took it a second time. He passed it the second time. He got a D. But because it was one of his classes in his major, the D did not count. And so I remember as a parent thinking, gosh, I don't know where this is going to end. And he said to us, well, it's going to end when I take it again and pass it. And I think, and he did, he passed it last fall with a B. Again, it was online. So he's taken it in person, online, then he took it hybrid, and he had a mentor who helped him. And so he said to me, he goes, Mom, I was talking to him earlier today, and he said, you know, it's all about what you put in here, whether it's your body, your mind, your spirit. Your mind has to be with you. And he goes, I've learned a lot about that. He's a weightlifter as well. So he said, tell him that. Tell him it's what you put in, and that's going to come out. So there it is from the mouth of a personal trainer. So it's all those things affect our outcome. There's a woman named Carol Dweck who is really pioneered this concept called growth mindset. And Carol Dweck is really, um, like I said, she's a pioneer in helping people understand how to approach things so that they can grow. And when she did her work, she came up with two things. She said, there are some people who have growth mindsets and some who have closed mindsets or fixed mindsets. I love this graphic because you can just kind of see it right there in the brain. One is locked and one is growing. And I would venture to say that at any time in our lives, with any situation, we could have either one of those. I don't find many people that I know who are always one or always the other. I think even if we are more one than the other, we dip in the other. Um, so you might want to think about the challenge that you just wrote down, just without knowing too much about growth and fixed mindset. But before we go into it, when you look at the challenge that you're facing, or the goal, or the wish, or the change that you want to make, is your mindset locked or is it open to growth? And so, what do I mean by fixed and locked? When we have that kind of a mindset of and we all, I think people recognize it in themselves, we recognize it in each other for sure. Um, it's people who are closed off to options and growing. And some of that comes from deep down within us. We say things like, I'm not that smart. I used to say to myself, I am not good in math. Because in math class, I hated going to the board in high school math class. It was just, oh, I hated it. And so I convinced myself that I was horrible at math. Um, and I am not. I'm not an algebra 15 trig person, but I can do math. And it took me a long time to get to that point. When my mindset was closed, I was never going to be as smart as the people in my class who were that. Um, Other ways that we look at closed mindset, I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake, so I'm just not going to try it. I don't want to embarrass myself. Ugh, I'm going to give up. I've got frustration, so I'm going to give up. If we take frustration and work through it, it's a different mindset. Um, so go back here. All right, so some of the things that we say to ourselves when our mind is closed, when our mindset is closed, it's too hard. I'm not going to be good at this. There's no way I can do this. If you think about whether you're in school right now and you think, like my son, I've taken this class before, I can't pass it, there's no way. Had he stuck with that, he'd never get that degree that he's hoping for and that he's working towards. Why should I bother if I'm not naturally good at it? Why should I ever take a math class if I know already I'm not good at math? Um, I know that for my dad, he was 58 when he started working on his associate degree. 58. And he finished his associate degree. And a couple years later, he says to my mom, now I'm going for my bachelor's. And she was just like, for what? You're in your 60s. Why do you need a bachelor's degree? You just retired. And he was like, because I've always wanted to do it, but I never thought I was smart enough. Um, so I admire my dad in that way, because he didn't let the fixed mindset that said, well, you went to the Navy, then you did a whole working life, and you raised six kids, and now you're retiring, so you ought to stop. He didn't let that stop him from doing something that he wanted to do. So he had a very much an open mindset. Um, so when we think about fixed mindset, we look at a couple more things. All right, it's our fear of failure. Sometimes we just want to avoid things. We want to avoid the challenge. I was talking to a woman who teaches at a community college here yesterday, and she said, oh, but sometimes fixed mindset can be really helpful. She goes, I mean, I just tell my husband, I can't learn how to use that lawnmower. She goes, I'm just not good enough with machines. And she goes, works every time. She goes, that's how I use fixed mindset to my benefit. Um, but when we're talking about learning and reaching our goals, maybe her goal is to stay on the couch, so she's reaching her goal through a fixed mindset. We're also sometimes resistant to putting forth the effort. Oh, but it's just going to hurt, and I don't want to do that. I'm just not going to do that. And also, sometimes when our mindset is so fixed, we don't want feedback from other people. Just don't even tell me. I just don't want any of that feedback from you. Um, we do the comparison things. I'm never going to be good enough. I'm not as good as that person. Um, or our identity. Well, I was born this way, so of course I'm just never gonna, change. Okay, so those are some of our fixed mindset realities or ways that we think. As you look at the problem that you're working on, or your challenge, or your goal, or your wish, is any of this thinking creeping into that? Just make a note for yourself. Growth mindset. So, quite the opposite. Things are growing, you're unlocked, you're learning from your mistakes. You're questioning yourself. Is this the best that I can do? Can I do better? Um, well, if I just try harder, then I can probably do it. Well, I'm frustrated, but I'm not going to give up because I'm just not. And oh, you told me I should try this. I'll try that. Feedback is helpful when you have a growth mindset. Um, so again, look at the difference in the kinds of questions or the kind of comments that you make to yourself and to others when your mindset is open to growth. Um, I love the fourth one down. I'm not there yet. You're a yet person. If your mindset is open, it might take time, but I know I can do this. I know I can get better at this. And then looking at the difference between the two, starting to compare. Well, closed mindset, we had a fear of failure, but we have a sense of resilience when our mindset is open and growing. We don't avoid challenges anymore. We embrace them because we know that they can help us learn and grow. Um, we're not resistant to feedback. I take your feedback as thank you. That helps me. Um, and I liked this one too. We don't compare ourselves to other people. We let them inspire us. Think about the difference that is if I say, well, I can never be smart as that person. And instead I can say, they're smart and they worked hard and I can too. And their growth can inspire my growth. And then the yet mentality, not limiting in ourselves, but also saying, I'm not there and I will be there. I'm just not there yet. Fixed versus growth, one of the things that we look at is we're not necessarily focusing on the end outcome when we're in the middle of a growth mindset. We're looking at a process. I love a good process, and I don't mind change and working through it. That's just part of the nature of who I am. Sometimes it's difficult, but I think that in general, I love to watch people and processes move forward. So, given that, now, if all of you had different comments to the first question, but does this still evoke the same things when you compare growth mindset and fixed mindset? And you think about this picture. Most of you had a growth mindset focus when we started this. Um, for some, just being able to look at the difference between um, fixed and growth helps to move this to a different realm in their minds. Um, any questions? I know we can do questions at the end, but I'm just wondering if anybody has any questions right now about the difference between fixed and growth, if you want to either unmute your microphone or put them in the chat, either way works. Any questions or observations about fixed versus growth mindset? Maybe an experience you've had if you want to share it.
I find myself straddling both. It's weird.
Do you find that the environment makes a difference, Bob? I'm just curious.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid of a challenge. Still have a lot to learn, but I think as I get older, I become less risk tolerant.
Mhm.
And I think that's a function of aging. And I used to not be that way like I am now. So I really contemplate the downside more than I used to because the runway's a lot shorter than it used to be. So less time to recover if you do make a mistake to correct it.
And that mindset can shift. I mean, that's your mindset, but I bet if you took any one of the whatever your situation, um, you can still always change that mindset. It's within us to do it. But yes, w more fear creeps in, um, and we focus more on the outcome than the process sometimes the older we get, I think. Anything
Yeah.
else? Yeah, somebody said same as Bob. I'm set in my ways as I get older. Yep. Okay. I want to move from that to so with an opened mindset, um, I'm going to talk a little bit about creative problem solving. And this is what I studied when I went to Buffalo State to do my master's in creativity change, creativity and change leadership. And the word innovation was thrown in there. Um, so what is creative problem solving? Well, it is actually something you can study and get a degree in because I did. I had no idea when I used to roll up those pieces of newsprint for people and just say, go type them up. I didn't. I just knew that I was unsettled about something, and I had no idea that beginning in the 1950s, there was a group of people exploring this stuff, going, how do we help people solve problems? And is there a process that we can use to do that? Um, Two of the pioneers, Alex Osborne and Sidney Parnes, were instrumental in starting the center where I studied, the International Center for Studies in Creativity in Buffalo, New York. And a woman named Ruth Noller came along later. And so there's been a lot of research. There's been a lot of study done. I don't know if you've ever said this to yourself, but I'm curious if anyone has ever said, well, I'm just not creative. Um, I'm just not that creative. And that was one of the first things we talked about in graduate school. We're all creative. We all have that capacity, but it goes back to our mindset. Now, I might be differently creative. I was taking an art class one time and I love the concept of art, but I have never been a visual artist. Give me a paintbrush, and if I, eke out a something, you're never going to recognize what it is. That's not my strength. Facilitating a group of people is my strength. And I was taking this art class, and I just kept comparing myself to the young woman across from me. Her art was gorgeous, just drop dead gorgeous. And it was a glass fusion class. So I cut out all these little pieces of glass and fused them together. And one of the things I did make was it was like a little tray. And it was the concept that we were working with was just black and white stuff. We had to use black and white glass. And I ended up making a little phone holder for my dad because he kept losing his cell phone all the time. And all I had to do was have a white background and little black buttons. And the minute I gave it to him, he goes, for my cell phone. And I was like, he recognizes my art. Was it that gorgeous, beautiful other stuff? No, but it was useful and it was kind of novel. So we have to get out of our minds that we're not creative. So I believe that everyone on this call is creative. And whatever challenge is ahead of you, I believe you have the capacity to create and and change that. So what is creative problem solving? It's just a bunch of stages that we all go through when we don't know what the solution to something is. It's a process that we go through. And there are things that affect that process. The people around us affect it, the environment affects it, and it affects the end outcome of our creativity. So when we look at the CPS, creative problem solving, there's four stages. And then kind of around the outside of the stage is we're constantly assessing regardless of which stage we're in. So we're going to go through each one of those for a minute. And as we do this, I'd like you to take the challenge or the goal or the wish, keep that one in mind, and I'll ask you to just jot a few things down. So the first thing that you do when you've got a problem is you clarify it. Now, I have my statement down here that I'm looking at, and I'm going to explore that a little bit. And I found that it's helpful to ask yourself some questions to explore that challenge a little bit more. How to, let's say, you're trying to find budget to go to school. Okay, you're trying to find the finances to go to school. So the vision might be how to find the resources I need to get my education. Okay, or how might I go about getting the resources I need to pay for my education? A different way to ask it is, in what ways might I find the resources that I need to pay for my education, support myself while I'm in there? Um, and then what might be all the ways to it? Those are just different question starters that I've sometimes found are helpful to ask. So rather than saying, how do I pay for school? That's very different from saying, what are all the ways that I might get the support I need to go to school. So take a minute with your challenge or your wish or your goal and ask yourself a couple of these questions and just jot a few notes down for yourself. How might you go about moving forward with that? In what ways might you? What are all the ways? I'll give you a minute to do that. Okay, so that's the first part of creative problem solving. And I think I should probably say that this is not a 15-minute process, that it can really take longer. I think we might have an open microphone. Yeah, just check your microphones. I can't see who it is, but oh, there it went away. Okay. One of the things I learned in graduate school was the value of incubation when you're trying to solve a problem. That you might go at it for a while and then step away and give it some room to breathe, so that you're not making a rash decision, so that you can kind of consider, do that assessment part that was in part of that document at the beginning. All right, so the next thing is you explore all your ideas. And some ways to do that. Most people will say, oh, this is when you brainstorm. So this is what I was stuck in. I knew how to do this part. I'm not really sure I knew how to help people at the very beginning explore and clarify their issues. But you start to think about all your options. And when you're doing that, it's something called divergent thinking, which means you're thinking big and wild and you're not censoring yourself. You're just going for the wildest ideas. I once had a group of publishers who were working on a curriculum to develop. And at one point, one of them said, we could never, they threw out an idea and they said, we could never do that because there's no way that the boss would go for it. So what I had him do then is go for all the ideas that the boss would never go for. And it put him in a different kind of thinking. And they actually ended up finding out something that would work. So it's kind of messing with your mind a little bit, opening it up and furthering your thinking. So I'm going to ask you to take a minute and come up with 10 things that could help you solve that challenge. I'm going to give you 1 minute. You're going to move quickly. You're going to strive for quantity. Go for at least 10 things that could help you address your challenge or your goal or your wish and help you move forward with that. Don't judge it. Even if you think that that's a dumb idea, just go to the next one. Okay, take 1 minute, come up with 10 ideas to help you solve that goal, wish, or challenge. Go. And pencils up. Okay, just type in the chat. How many of you were able to come up with at least 7? Or a thumbs up, either way. All right. We got a 7. Did anybody come up with 10? Got some 7s and 6s. Good. The reason that we sometimes strive for quantity is just because the first ideas, I forget what the statistic is, but I think it's like the first 80% of your ideas are ideas that have already been done. They're not the novel and new ones. Now, some of them may help you, but it's only when we get to that next level that we can really start to dig in and get into that creative thinking aspect. So that was a divergent kind of thinking thing. So then once we have all of our ideas for how to solve the problem or the challenge, how we address it, we then do something called convergent thinking, which is exactly that, converging. We start to eliminate some things. You don't do that in the middle of brainstorming. You just say, oh yeah, good idea, good idea, good idea, just to see where it all goes. But when you get into convergent thinking, you're then going to take those ideas that you came up with and you're going to look at the most promising idea. So maybe you want to look over that list that you just did. And if you had to circle one that you thought, I think this one really might help me. That's when you start to begin to bring your thinking to a different level of focus, a different kind of focus. And you can actually say, what I see myself doing with this is blank, blank, blank. And in looking at that, you ask yourself some questions, maybe some evaluative thinking. Um, is it this? Would it help me do this? Does it get me where I want to go? Again, you just keep asking yourself more and more questions to move forward in this process of thinking. So maybe take a minute and just for yourself star one thing that is something that maybe you want to take a look at later as maybe an option that you want to explore a little bit more. Oftentimes, when we do that, when we pick that one option, we then take that option and blow up our thinking again and do divergent thinking again. And it's this process that's really dynamic of thinking, thinking big, converging, thinking a lot, converging. So it's a combination of all of that. And so then the last part of the process, once you've clarified what it is that you're trying to solve, you've come up with a lot of ideas, you've selected the best and kind of refined those, well, then it's time to implement your plan. You formulate a plan and you go for it. And if your mindset is open, you're not going to worry if you fail. Yeah, I love the picture of this rocket. It's just like, woohoo, here we go. Not sure what's going to happen, but we're on a path. And sometimes we just have to do that to try some things. If we fail, we get back up because a growth mindset says we're resilient and we move forward. So sometimes it helps to share that plan with others. It makes it more real and helps us um, actually implement. We can get stuck. And when I got all these ideas and I think this one might be the right thing, but I'm not going to get off the dime. Sometimes that's where a mentor can help us move forward, or a friend, or a parent, or a spouse, or a sibling. Anybody, by sharing it with others, it makes it real, and we can move forward with those. So those four steps of the process, where we're clarifying the goal, wish, or challenge, we're doing some ideative thinking, ideation, we're developing the ideas a little bit more and refining them, and then pulling a plan together and implementing it. Um, that's kind of, in a nutshell, a way to solve problems. My kids said they feel like they grew up on Post-its because when they were doing essays in elementary school, and they would just sit there and go, I have no idea what to write about. And they saw the dreaded pack of Post-its come out from me. They're like, oh man, Mom. But it helped them because and now I see them do it and it's kind of fun. Like we need some more Post-its here. Um, we live in Minnesota, so it's the land of 3M, so they were always very plentiful. But that process, I offer you that as a way to help you keep your mindset open, keep you unstuck from fixed thinking, and moving forward um, to a mindset that facilitates change in your life. I think this statement, I have no idea who Robin Sharma is, but I like this quote. Um, that it's hardest at the beginning. And I don't know if you feel like this, but often to get started, it's really tough. And then in the middle, it's super messy. And you just think, I want to go back to that, comfort of where I was before I started on this path towards change. And it's hard and it's a struggle and there's frustration. And then at the end, you're like, I'm so glad I did that. And I know I've had the privilege of interviewing several people, scholars with the Chatfield Edge, who I've interviewed them at different points at the beginning when they're just kind of all over the board. David, I know you see this all the time. And then they're in the middle and I'm going to quit, I'm going to stop, I don't know what I'm doing, and blah, blah, blah. And then they move forward and it's like, there they are with that certificate in hand, or that degree, or even just the course completed, which is enough. Um, so that's kind of the process in a nutshell that I wanted to share with you. I'm going to open it up for questions in a minute, but I want to remember to just tell you this, that there are a couple books that if you want to play around with this a little bit more, Carol Dweck has a great book on growth mindset. Um, and there's another one about the McGuire's did it, teaching yourself how to learn strategies you can use to ace any course at any level. So those are just two. You can get them on Amazon. If you're interested in more creative problem solving and you want to play around with that, there's a whole institute that happens every summer. You can go and just, play with Post-its all summer, or for a long weekend. Um, and then there's a lot of resources about helping to think creatively and solve problems. And then this practice book, I actually have it on my desk. Oh, you can't see it, sorry, because of my filter, but they're just practice problems. And there's some great, really short exercises that you can do. And sometimes I keep a book like this on my desk because if I'm stuck on something, maybe I'm stuck writing something and getting started, and I just pick one up and start playing with it. Having a playful attitude will get you really far with all of this. So that's the creative problem solving growth mindset. Are there questions that anybody has or reactions as you look back at the challenge or goal or wish that you brought in? And maybe did your thinking change over the last 30, 40 minutes? Is there anything we can just kind of open mics up if you want to, um, and share with each other if you have questions or want to make some comments and observations?
Jeannie, I had an observation about myself and wondered about your thoughts, which is when I had to brainstorm my ideas super quickly, and then I look back at them, um, several of them were like external sources of helping to solve my problem. Does that make sense? As
Hmm.
opposed to, what I could do
Right.
to solve the problem. It was, manna from heaven would solve my problem, all those things. And so I think that's where my challenge sometimes come in, and a lot of people is, we want the solution to come externally,
Absolutely.
you know.
And I think it's probably sometimes the solution. Um, I, I talked about environment a little bit in the creative problem solving process, that if you're in an environment that supports your change,
Mm.
that sometimes motivates you internally. So if the external part is supporting you, so if the universe is giving me these things, I might be a little more motivated to dig deeper. But I do think often it's a combination of both, and sometimes the source is external.
Mm, mhm,
And when it's like, okay, I'm avoiding that thinking. Is that closed mindset thinking?
mhm,
Are you just afraid of the challenge? Are you
mhm,
it, go back to the closed mindset attributes and take a minute and look at those and think about that.
mm,
What makes you go to the external versus the intrinsic
mhm,
motivation? Intrinsic motivation is really hard.
mhm.
We don't want to. We want the easy answer. My son said today, he goes, Mom, it's just so easy that we want what's on our phone. We want it, just social media can solve it for me, or I can find that out. So what else? Any other observations that people had?
Jeannie, I liked it when you said that just passing a class, not just getting the degree or just getting the certificate. Sometimes it's the small steps that I get hung up on, if you will, and I think of the long term rather than just taking the small steps to get to the long term.
Mhm.
And I get, which I'm sure most people do, or some people do, I get in my head a lot. And then it's like, oh, I can't do this. And why am I worrying about it? Don't just move on, just pick something else, do something else, rather than sticking to something because I doubt myself.
And Amy, there was a slide that I showed earlier, which talked about growth mindset and fixed mindset. Um, and on fixed mindset, um, part of it is that it's the outcome we're looking at. Well, this one class I passed, that's not enough. But growth mindset said, yes, it is. I'm in the process of moving towards that. And this one
Yes.
class does matter. So again, it's about reframing what we're thinking.
And getting through that, like I said, just the small steps I get
Yeah.
hung up on sometimes, and I don't think about the day to day that I can do to help solve the problem or process the problem. It's I need to get to the end. I need to get to
Yeah.
the end.
Yeah.
And then I get discouraged a lot faster that way.
We can be an impatient people.
Yes, the instant gratification with the
Yeah.
phones, like you said, and just everything. It's right now, right now.
Mm-hmm. Anything else anybody wants to?
It makes me think of that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? If you have, everybody knows that, right?
Keep
Maybe.
going. I do, but keep going.
One bite at a time.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that the little steps do lead up to our success. And it's leading up to keeping our minds open and available to what's around us. Constantly reframing our thinking. One more second if anybody wants to share anything, and then I can turn it back over to Bob or David. My encouragement to you would be practice it. I mean, this is not easy. And, like I said, even as I was preparing for this, I was like, how do I take a workshop I've done in a day and bring it down to 40 minutes or 30 minutes? Like, there's no way I can do that. And I was like, well, that's really closed-minded thinking. So you might want to reframe that, or you're not going to be able to do that. So it's constant and constant and constant that we've got to sharpen. It's a skill that we learn. Creative thinking is definitely a skill. So thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Jeannie. We appreciate your information, and I did learn a few things. I had a lot of self-reflection as you were speaking, and really appreciate the time and effort you put into this for a quality presentation, and appreciate the help that you've given us at the Chatfield Edge from our very beginnings with all the in the conference room with all the notepads and ideas taped to the wall. Now I know where that originated from.
You
Just puts it
do.
in context. Yeah, you probably still have those somewhere. For all the folks on the line, this is recorded, so it's going to be available on our website. Should be tomorrow. If you go to the About tab on our website, go down to the bottom of the screen, it'll talk about videos. Click on that, and you can view this or other past webinars. You can also take a look at some of our Ursuline Legacy video recordings that talk about the Ursuline sisters that came to Brown County, Ohio in 1845 and are still involved in their ministry to date, and how the Chatfield Edge was founded by the Ursulines of Brown County, and how we are expected to and honored to carry that legacy forward. So a lot of content. So I would encourage you to take a look at that and stay connected with the Chatfield Edge. So thanks everyone for attending tonight, and I don't have anything else to say, so we don't need to consume the other 7 minutes. Let's go about our business.
Thank you. Have a good night,
Good
everyone.
night.